Hello, and welcome to Why Am I Like This? The podcast for those who didn't get enough hugs as a child. I'm Laura Wood, and I'm a trauma therapist.
And I'm Michaela Beaver. I'm a psychiatric nurse practitioner.
So, Michaela, why are we doing this podcast?
I'm so glad you asked. We want to help you understand yourself a bit better, how the things you learned about yourself and the world in childhood are still affecting you today. We want to figure out, why are we like this? Those random things about ourselves that we might wonder about, like, why am I so jumpy? Why am I so anxious? Why do I take things so personally? Why are my thoughts so negative? Why do I feel like I have to fix everything all the time?
Yes, and today we are talking about paradigms, and we are going to try to answer the following questions. What is a paradigm or core belief? How are these paradigms created, and how are they causing problems? How do we use the idea of the paradigm or core belief to realize that we are the solution to lasting change? And so we're going into a new year, and I feel like this topic is perfect because if you're setting goals for next year, for 2026, you finally get around to becoming that version of yourself and, making some change. The episode is going to tell you why your past efforts might have failed and how you can get started looking at things differently. So let's get into it. What is a paradigm?
That's such a good question. I feel like for professionals, we're like, oh, I know what a paradigm is, right? Like we think about those like conceptual frameworks about like different theoretical frameworks, and those are our paradigms, right? But I think it's actually more simple than that. A paradigm is just like the way that we look at something. Mm-hmm. And it might be these subconscious collections of habits, beliefs, or patterns that, we kind of are automated into our normal habits of daily life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. So it's like when you say like subconscious collection, that's essentially the way that I see the world and the way that I interact with myself, and how those beliefs or like core beliefs actually like inform my reactions to things, right?
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
My behavior in a way.
Yes. And so I think that I liked this example. So, looking at like paradigms as our pathways, our neuronal pathways, as part of like how we like experience the world, and that's kind of like how we think about things. So like these things that we learned in childhood created some of these neuronal pathways, or these like ideas that we think about ourselves, and can be tied to emotional survival maps, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, emotional survival maps. So like that's a really interesting way to put it. I think to me that means how I'm going to navigate the environment that I'm in, how I'm going to adapt to the world around me and be successful and like keep myself emotionally safe, because we all think about physical safety really frequently in childhood, especially for like parents of kids. We're thinking about, oh, let's keep them physically safe. But almost, I would argue, like more importantly, emotional safety matters so much in the context of how that like shapes your behaviors in your world. Like an emotional survival map is something that basically allows you to deal with the rejection of your mom or dad, like, not having enough time for you, maybe because they work a lot, or maybe they're, they travel for work and they're gone all the time, and you have to like navigate how to deal with that. You miss them and that they're not around, and like how that's not your fault, or that you feel like that is your fault. Like those emotional survival maps, like how do I get through this really hard thing?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. When you were just saying that, I literally was thinking, okay, so what is the one thing that parents always tell their kids to remind them to be physically safe? be careful,
Be
right?
careful. Yeah.
All the time. It's a be
Yeah.
careful, be careful, be careful. And then
Mhm.
like that, they're like need to try to control the physical safety can have like that creates an emotional survival map for kids, right? Like,
Mhm.
oh, I'm in danger.
Yeah, totally. Right? Like if we have what they call like helicopter parents that are constantly like all over us, like telling us, "Oh, that's not safe, that's not safe, that's not safe." Like we're essentially learning the paradigm that we come away with is that the world is an unsafe place and
Mm-hmm.
that we don't have the capacity to navigate it. Um, when we believe that we are capable, like we can tolerate unsafety when we believe that we are capable. Like it's that idea of our self-image, like the image of ourself is that I am capable or I'm not capable, right? I do have capacity or I don't have capacity. Who am I to my family? Am I important? Am I not important? That image of ourself really shapes, you know, how we interact with people and how we present ourselves to people, like what we allow other people to see or what we don't want other people to see.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, in preparation for this conversation, we kind of are looking at a couple of different concepts from different books. And in one of them, we're taking some information from Bob Proctor and his concept about paradigms and how to shift them.
Mm.
And in that, he kind of says that our paradigms are these ideas that we learned about ourselves in childhood, kind of like what we've already been talking about. And then we looked at the idea that, we are the people who we are creating the problem, because if we have this negative thought about ourselves, like I forgot the example that you just gave, like that we're not safe, or
Mhm.
whatever,
It's not important.
that I'm not important, that like it's my fault that my parents are fighting, whatever, right? We develop these thoughts about the world around us in childhood, and so we are the problem, but we are the only person that can create the solution to the problem. And so that concept is kind of really, part of like a cognitive behavioral concept, don't you think?
Mhm. Yeah, this aligns really well with cognitive behavioral therapy or CBT, which we talk about sometimes. CBT is the idea or, operates on the paradigm that our core beliefs and our thoughts impact our emotions and then impact our behaviors, right? So it's like a think, feel, do paradigm. So basically, if I believe that I'm not important, I'm going to feel ashamed and small, and I'm going to behave in a way that aligns with that belief and with that feeling, by maybe hiding or not going out for the play, or not asking for help when I need it, or not asking for attention when I feel like I need it, right?
Mm-hmm.
We often, the I'm noticing that, one of the key ideas here is that you don't act on what you want, but you act on what your paradigm allows, right? So you don't necessarily, it's not just about what you want, it's about like what your internal belief system is allowing you to access and is allowing you to go forward, right? So let's say I want to go out for the play, I want to be a performer, but my belief is that I'm not special, and my belief is that, everyone will laugh at me, or that people will judge me, or that people won't like it. And that makes me feel, insecure. And then I don't go out for the play because I don't want to be rejected, because I don't
Mm-hmm.
want to experience that feeling of rejection. Maybe the reason I feel like I'm not special, the reason I feel like people will laugh at me is because when I have shown creativity in the past and I have like gone to my mom and been so excited about this artwork that I did. And she said, oh, whatever, like that's not important right now. Or, I'm helping your brothers with their homework and they're more important, math is more important than art, or, those kinds of things, like getting shot down, getting rejected, basically being told that you're not important, you're not special, can really create this paradigm, and you can't operate outside of that. You can't initiate behaviors outside of that because it just really won't, your system like won't allow you to, right?
Yeah.
Like,
I love
wonder,
that.
like,
I think that like that's such a good way of describing it. And so like now fast forward 30 years or 20 years, and now you're like up for a possible promotion, or like you should put in for a possible promotion, and you don't allow yourself to, because in that paradigm you believe that you're not special enough, right? And so that's the whole concept, is that these things that happened and the things that we believed about ourselves in childhood are now kind of shifting gears, and they're not the same problems. We're not going out for a play anymore. We're trying to get promoted, or we're going to start it. We're thinking I should start a new business. Oh, I'm not good at that. I'm not going to be, I'm going to fail because that's just what I do. And that's how those paradigms, even though we want to make lasting change and we think that it would be good for us today, we can't let ourselves, or we can't win, or we can't get ahead because we're in that box. So.
Yeah. And in order to operate in that, we have to stay, like, our bodies are trained and ingrained to like maintain homeostasis. So we'll actually hold ourselves back in order to stay in that zone of like what's comfortable, instead of taking the risk, because the feeling of rejection feels too big. Because in childhood, one of the things the reasons why these things stay true over time is because emotions don't have access to time. Emotions don't know when it is. They don't realize that you're an adult now, and feeling rejection as an adult is a lot less dangerous and a lot less impactful as feeling rejection as a child. So when you feel rejection as a child, your attachment system and your survival system is activated, because as a child, you're truly dependent. You're vulnerable and dependent. You need other people in order to not die, and they keep you alive. And so especially those primary relationships that you have, rejection from those primary relationships can literally be life and death in childhood.
Yeah.
But in adulthood, rejection is just an emotional experience that we can tolerate and we can move through if we've built up those emotional tolerance muscles, and if we've delivered ourselves from the sense of not being special, not being important, not being good enough. If we've been able to, make some headway in the paradigm shift, like of starting to believe in yourself a little bit more, then we can tolerate rejection. So like realizing that rejection as an adult is not dangerous. I always say it's difficult. It's not dangerous.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's a really good point that you made, because it's like, I'm thinking like, oh, but what if that person's still that, like, there are definitely people that would argue that it is still very dangerous to put themselves out there and be rejected as an adult. And I think that you hit the nail on the head when it's like, no, it doesn't have to be, right? It might feel that way, but it doesn't have to feel that way. And that is something that we have control over.
Well, and feelings aren't facts, right? They're real, but they're not always true, right? Our emotions, again, they don't have access to time, but they also don't necessarily have access to because they don't have access to time, they don't have access to the present reality of like what's true and what's not true. Emotions aren't operating from your prefrontal cortex. They're not operating from your, your executive functioning control panel, right? They're operating from your limbic system. They're operating from a perspective of life and death and reactivity. And so when you change the amount of access to like time and truth, then it can gradually like shift those emotions. So for example, if my emotion is saying this is dangerous, and I give it a little bit of information, I say, no, this is difficult, it's not dangerous, Difficult isn't life-threatening. Difficult might be really, really difficult, right? On a scale of 0 to 10, it might be a 10, but it's not going to kill me.
Right.
So giving it a little bit of access to truth, a little bit of access to some cognitive information is allowing that emotion to maybe orient a little bit to the present.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, and that makes me think of the other quote that I really liked from that book is that like you can't outperform your self-image. And that kind of ties into the concept that we're, kind of talking about is like, until we can shift some of those things that we believe about ourselves, like in order to be loved, I have to be good, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I have to make everybody happy. Everybody's happiness matters more than myself, and so like, if we don't fix some of those like ideas about the world or the way that we view ourselves, then it's going to be really hard to make lasting change because we're going to keep reverting back to that old idea that like, hey, I have to be this way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those old ideas are so strong in us because of what we talked about, like the emotional survival maps. Like they believe these ideas, and the parts of us that are generating these ideas believe that it's life and death. They believe that we will die if we experience some of these challenges, some of these emotional challenges, right? Like what was true in childhood isn't always true today. And most of us at 18 don't just change all of our core beliefs and our paradigms about the world. Just because we're an adult doesn't mean we see things differently. We have to learn those things, and we have to do it on purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We have to use a lot of intention to make a change to the way that we see ourselves and the way that we see the world. We have to choose to do that.
Yeah. Well, and I think that sometimes the thing that gets in the way is that like our adult logic brain decides that these things are silly and they shouldn't be a problem.
Right.
So like, then we like further our like negative self-talk being like, well, I'm just like, I shouldn't feel this way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Shoulds are a huge staller of progress, right? Like a should, when we believe that we shouldn't have these problems, we should be better, we should be different, we should be something else, we're basically just shaming ourselves into believing or reinforcing the belief that we're not good enough, or that we're too much, or that, we can't be successful, or, that we must earn love. Like those beliefs will generally reinforce themselves with ideas and thoughts because of the habit loop. Like that's how brains work. What becomes automatic is reinforced over and over and over and over.
Right. And I think you're just setting yourself up for failure or to be unsuccessful because you're shaming yourself, but then like you haven't actually changed you're not actually doing anything to like accept that that's how you feel. And so then like you're going to keep feeling that way. And then it just like is this like circle that you just keep like having to relive over and over again. And you're not going to make progress when you feel shame. I know that like most of us, when we feel shame, myself included, I want to shut down. I want to like, I want to be mad, right? Like I want to be like, well, why did I do that? I'm never doing this again. Right. I was so proud of myself yesterday. I got the drill and I hung hooks all around the house. I'm like, who needs a man? I can do this. Right. And so I hung all the hooks. I hung the lights, but then I got to the end and I had the wrong like connectors.
Oh no.
At some point during the whole thing, I got turned around with the lights and they're all like hung and I have no way to connect them. And I was so mad. I was like, it just stole all of the thunder. I was like, look at me. I can do anything that I put my mind to. And then I was like, oh no. And then I was just like, that was it. I wanted to shut down. Like,
Yeah.
went into like, well, I guess I really can't do it, you know?
Mhm.
And so that's really hard.
It is really hard. And when we go through an experience like that, the feeling of defeat or the feeling of failure can really take us over, and it can be really mean to us. One of the things we have to make a choice about is how we're going to treat ourselves, right? And so when we have those negative thoughts about ourselves, and when we're upset and disappointed, I can be disappointed but still love someone, right? So I think about, how are you treating that child inside? Like, how are you treating yourself? And that part of you that feels little and feels ashamed and feels like a failure, thinking about that as like a hurt child. And how would you treat a child if they did that, right? So we can take those emotions and visualize them as like little children, because that's where they come from a child's perspective often, right? They don't have access to time. So we can talk to them like they're children, and we can help them feel more acceptable. If we meet them with compassion instead of with anger and, shame, then we often move through those feelings a little bit more quickly, because they're always hard. Life is full of hard.
Oh yeah. And you can't stop the hard things from happening, and we're humans and we're going to make mistakes and all of that, but that makes me think of like the book, The Four Agreements. And in that book, one of the things is like talking about how you like talk to yourself, drawing a blank on what the name of the agreement was, but it's like your words basically have the power to, bring you up or bring you down, which is like looking at that cognitive triangle. And, I think that like how you talk to yourself or how you were talked to can be a really big influencer of how you continue to talk with yourselves. And so like your words, even the ones that you speak to yourself, really do shape your reality and your own identity. If you say like, well, I am just so stupid, like I can't do anything right, that's maybe a thought that I might have had yesterday, and when that happens, it's going to steal the joy that you had, and it's going to maybe potentially prevent you from wanting to tackle things in the future.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's going to make you afraid of that failure again. It's going to make, basically what you're doing is you're telling yourself, this feeling is too much, I can't handle it. And when you tell yourself this feeling is worth avoiding at all costs, then you start to shut yourself down. And a lot of the work that we have to do in adulthood is getting access and opening up those parts of ourselves that we shut down in childhood when we started to feel ashamed. So like often when you have that sense of, negativity towards yourself, it's going to remind you, like if you do what's called a float back, where like we learn in EMDR, part of the protocol is to like float back to find the earliest time you felt that emotion. A lot of the time it's going to connect back to something that happened in childhood.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and it made me think of like the last podcast. I don't know if it's out. Well, it'll be out now by the time we talk about this, but talking about the power of vulnerability, and that like that is the thing that like destroys creativity, and that's what we're talking about. Like these are moments in childhood where we learned like, I never want to feel this way again. I don't ever want to be vulnerable. I don't ever want to like, I need to avoid this at all costs. And, that really damages our ability to be creative and like put ourselves out there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have to be willing to be vulnerable and to take risks. And the only way to know that you can take a risk and have it be safe is to often shift that paradigm that risks are inherently dangerous. Like sometimes we feel like conflict is dangerous. Sometimes we feel like like, being alone is dangerous. Sometimes we feel like putting ourselves out there and being vulnerable is dangerous. But we have to remember that those things are only going to we're going to have an emotional reaction, but we can handle those emotions. We can work with those emotions. We can accept ourselves and accept those emotions instead of be overwhelmed by them. I was reading something recently where the author was suggesting that we ask our emotions to share a little bit of them instead of overwhelm us. Right. So the author was saying like, hey, emotional experience, whatever, if it's shame, like, hey, shame, I see you, I'm overwhelmed. Can you tell me what your message is without overwhelming me? And really like ask that shame, like communicate with that shame inside. Sometimes visualizing it can help. Sometimes personifying it can help, like giving it a character or, giving it a color or a shape, something tangible. That can be really helpful in noticing, like, if I'm picturing this shame and it's, a orange circle, and I say to that shame, like, I feel really overwhelmed. Can you share your message with me without overwhelming me? And then maybe it will have something to say and it will back off a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Well, and you're essentially diffusing that shame by like even by acknowledging it and allowing it to have space.
Mm-hmm. That's absolutely right. The things that we do, the things that we resist will always persist, right? You say that all the time. But also, if you think about emotions like young children, what happens when you ignore a child? Like, most of the time they get a little louder. They get louder and louder and louder, and they fight and fight and fight, and they bug and bug and bug. And then eventually they'll shut down and stop and slink away and just go off by themselves. And that's like that shutdown feeling of numbness and like total disconnection. And so our emotions do that too. Sometimes they get overwhelming and we shut them down, and then we get totally disconnected from them.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That just made me think of like my youngest, mom.
Exactly.
You never just say it one time. Maybe that's a sign I'm not listening quick enough for him.
Right. But then when you stop what you're doing, you make eye contact and you say, hey, I'm right here. I see you. Then it stops and creates like an opportunity for connection instead of rejection. Right. But when you ignore, that's just rejection.
Right.
And rejection is one of the hardest feelings to feel. We don't like it as people.
No, it's not fun. Which is, I think, one of the main things that if we learn that in childhood, that is something that follows people, that's probably one of the main things that like, it really doesn't feel good ever in adulthood, in childhood, it doesn't feel good. And so, that can be one of the things that we do. And it doesn't always look the same, right? Like we talked about before, how sometimes like we put ourselves in situations that are comfortable, where like we feel like even if we get rejected, like we knew it was going to happen anyways. It's not that we're not doing things, even sometimes like we're just shutting down because people will be like, well, I get out, I put myself out there, but like it's like, well, yeah, but you put yourself out there to people, maybe it's a relationship thing, and you put yourself out there to people that that you never really were going to last with because you're afraid of putting yourself out there with someone who really would mean something to you because that would hurt too much. And so it may not be as obvious as like, oh, I just shut down.
Right. We find unavailable people, or sometimes we push people away in order to prevent the rejection from happening. Right. Like when we're in relationship with someone who we're afraid is going to leave, or we're afraid is going to reject us, we might actually start to push them away, like exclude them, become more independent, start focusing on ourselves, like stop really trying to seek connection. So we sort of distance ourselves from that person as a way to protect ourselves from the feeling of rejection.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the other things that I was thinking about in the context of like these paradigms, and the real thing that I was thinking about when like this whole concept and idea came up, my friend from Iowa marcoed me and was telling me about her experience with this and like what her thoughts were. And as she was telling me about it, I was literally like, huh, I have a really hard time letting go of stuff.
Mm,
And I feel like a big reason is that scarcity mindset. You know, I remember growing up, I never needed anything, right? I'm
mhm.
not saying that like I always had what I needed, but you know, I think like as kids, we want to fit in. We want to have the things that like maybe things make us feel like that's what's going to make us have friends, or people aren't going to like us unless we, you know, wear, you know, the Hollister
Yeah.
clothes or Abercrombie and Fitch like back in the day, right? Like we wanted
Right.
to have the things so that we could fit in and be popular, or like people would like us only if we have those things. That's very much like a childhood who I like that person and I need to look like them to be liked by them, right? Like I don't think that kids think like, oh, if I just act like myself, people will like me, right? That's not
Right.
a good thing to do. And so, you know, I think that like growing up, I always thought that like I didn't have those things and like I wanted them and you know, we didn't have access to them. So it's like
Mhm.
that scarcity mindset sets in. And then like now as an adult, that shows up as like feeling like, well, what if I need this?
Mhm.
What if I want to wear this again? What if I want to hang that somewhere someday? And then it makes it hard to let go of things. And then once I like was like, oh, I put the pieces of that mindset together with what was going on today. And I'm like, oh, that makes so much sense. And I was able to like throw away a bunch of stuff that I hadn't worn
Yeah.
in multiple years. And it was like, oh, that was really nice. Like it felt really good to let go and release that idea that like what if I can't get this someday,
Mhm.
you know?
Definitely. Sometimes tracking back to the original source of the distress can relieve the distress in the present, right? Because we notice, like, well, this isn't that. This isn't the same as then. And I'm not the same. And I don't have the same, limitations that I had back then. And so when we realize, like, this isn't that, it can really help us release that distress around whatever it is that we're dealing with.
Yeah. But I think that like knowing other people in my life that also had like really hard upbringings, like way like I can't even complain. Their lives were so much harder, like living in condemned buildings and
Mhm.
you know not knowing if they're going to have food, you know, and looking at them now, they also kind of have that mindset of like, well, I just spent like they just spend money frivolously and they don't pay attention to the money that they have, or they have a hard time letting go of things. They want to hold on to everything. And I think it partly comes from that scarcity mindset of like, well, now I have the money so I can spend it or whatever,
Mhm.
you know?
Yeah, that makes so much sense. We hold on to those paradigms, right? Like that's a paradigm belief that, we're not going to be able to do it. We're not going to have enough. There's never enough.
Right.
And I think a lot of us operate from that paradigm.
Yeah, absolutely. So then what do we do to start moving through and shifting these paradigms?
One of the things that, we were looking at from the four agreements is the agreement not to take anything personally. So I think when we talk about making a shift, we have to do these things on purpose and we have to change the way that we see ourselves and the world. In order to do that, we have to create new rules. Right. And so that's what a lot of these agreements are, is you're making new rules and new agreements that didn't apply back then, right? So you're saying, I'm going to make this now because I have the capacity to make a change and I have the capacity to do something different. So
Yeah.
I always talk to clients about this too. Like, it's really important to know that like people's behavior says more about them than it says about you.
Yeah.
So like, if you can't make me treat you badly, just like I don't have control over you, you don't have control over me. nothing is personal from that context, right? Like, and people say like, well, we have influence and we can, if I'm treating someone badly, they're more likely to treat me badly. Yeah, that's true. But that's because that person has only this much capacity for regulation.
Right.
But it's still their responsibility to maintain their composure and regulation and treat you with respect and dignity like a human, even if you behave badly, right? So we all are responsible for our own experience in terms of our own behavior and our own emotional regulation. We're all responsible for that. So nothing others do is because of you. What others say and do is a projection of their own reality. It's not about your presence within their reality.
Yeah, I love that. I think like taking everything personally is exhausting.
Mm-hmm.
And like you have to put so much energy into everything you do, everything you say, everything that everybody else says. How does that, and then like you're spinning that like back after hanging out with people and you're like, oh my gosh, that was my fault. Like, and I think that like it's just overwhelming. And I think that like this is a great way to look at it. And using that cognitive triangle is so important because if you're thinking these thoughts, you may not be able to stop them from coming.
Mm-hmm.
But if you go, oh, what's the second agreement? Like, I'm not going to take anything personally, then you can actively change those thoughts and say, well, that's not true, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't have to take it personally. If they behave in that way, that's their responsibility. I can own my part in it, right? And I can own my part in something because actions cause consequences or have consequences, right? But I can own my part in it without owning theirs too.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I can be accountable without assigning myself the power that I can control other people's behavior and feelings.
Yeah.
So accountability is important. Accountability is, if I hurt someone, I can apologize and repair that relationship. If I make a mistake, I can own up to that mistake and be honest about what happened. And I can say, I regret my decision. I made a poor choice. I'm sorry that it hurt you. But that's not the same thing as me saying your behavior, the way that you treated me is my responsibility.
Yes, absolutely. The other thing that I think about that we can do is recognizing that our actions, while we feel like we're in control of them, I think about like, I'm thinking about like food in this instance, right? Like, I think that like, if I have the behavior, I walk in the house and I go grab a snack, right? And every time I get in the house, I always just like, I'm going to like snack on food or I'm hungry right away when I get home. I'm not actually hungry every time I get home, but this is a behavior and it can start at some point in time. And so when we see this like pattern of behavior, whether it's surrounding food or relationships or work or, not putting yourself out there, whatever it is, we can go, why? Why do I feel this way? And then keep asking yourself why. Is like until you get to the like, oh, this is what happened in childhood. Okay, now that makes sense moment, right? Because it's not like I walked in the door and I ate while I was hungry. No, I wasn't really hungry every time I do that, right? So like, why am I doing it? Oh, I had a hard day. I was at work all day and I'm feeling like overwhelmed. And I know that when I eat that snack, I'm going to feel better.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so we're going to go like, okay, now I know that happens. When did that happen? A long time ago. Was that something that I did before? And like you said, when you can trace it back to that original moment, then that can kind of take away that like power from it. And then you can go, oh, okay, well, I guess I don't have to do that anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. You can ask yourself why and not accept the surface level answer too. You can say, okay, let me go a little bit deeper, right? Because sometimes the answer to why did you do that is, well, I've always done it that way.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, but why do you do it that way? Why did you do it just now? Why did you, what was the urge that you were noticing? What was the voice in your head? What was the feeling you were feeling? How did it benefit you? What was helpful about it? Asking some of those questions and really like prompting a little bit more can be super duper helpful in gaining more insight. A lot of us walk around without a lot of insight. We sort of we're on autopilot all the time. And remember, autopilot is based on those initial understandings and paradigms that we created in childhood because they're automated now. They've been reinforced over and over and over. Our brain has automated them. And so we haven't really thought much about changing them until now. So that's an important thing to remember, is that this isn't going to change immediately. It takes time and repetition to get through and do something over and over again to start making that new behavior, the automated behavior.
Yeah. I think about and I think we've talked about this before, but I'm going to say it in a different way maybe. But that makes me think about potty training.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. We don't actually consciously have to think about going to the bathroom. But at some point in time, I just didn't do that, right? It wasn't just something we always knew. There was a moment in time where we had to train our body on what that was supposed to be, how we were supposed to do that. And so think of it as we are automating these things so that our brain can take off a load, right? If we had to think about all the things all the time, life would be really challenging. We wouldn't get anything done. And so, I think that automation is a helpful tool, and we want to just change what is automated now, right? We're changing that core belief, we're changing that paradigm, and we're moving it into a different thing. I am someone who exercises 5 times a week, right? That's who I am. It is automated into my daily routine. That's what we want to happen. We want to be that person that drinks all the water and, chooses to eat healthy food and doesn't crave sugar, right? We want to choose to be those people and in order to get there, we need to figure out why we're automating ourselves to do the opposite.
And a lot of the time we don't know what our initial paradigms are. So part of the work is figuring out what your core beliefs are. And there's lots of ways to do that. When you are asking yourself why, the goal is to eventually come to a point of what is the belief about this that is telling me that this is something I have to do? So, for example, why am I struggling to get out of bed in the morning? Why, let's say I can't get out of bed. I'm late for work all the time. What's helpful about staying in bed? It's helpful because I don't have to face the day. Why don't I want to face the day? Well, because I believe that it's going to be too hard or I feel overwhelmed. So what do I believe about that? Maybe I believe that I can't handle my emotions, right? Yeah. So you're kind of digging into what's the core belief underlying.
Well, I'm just a tired person.
Right. And so why, right? What's helpful about being tired? That's what I would ask myself. What's helpful? Sometimes it's an avoidance strategy to not have to deal with a difficult emotion. And sometimes it's not being able to face that I don't feel good enough.
Yeah. Well, I think that's kind of agreement number 3 is don't make assumptions, right? So right now we're just assuming that we're just a tired person and that's just who we are, right? And if we think that, then that's just an easy answer that we can just be well, that's just who I am and I don't have to do anything to change it.
Yeah, when we say to ourselves, that's just who we are, well, I'm just anxious. I'm just depressed. What we're saying to ourselves is, I can't make a change. I can't change who I am. And that's not true. So questioning our present reality, putting our thoughts on trial, so to speak, is what they call it in CBT. Putting our thoughts on trial is, what evidence do I have that demonstrates that this is true? Is there any counterfactual evidence that demonstrates that it's not true? What would have to be true what would be true if I accepted that this can change? When I ask myself that, I'm asking, what would I have to face in order for me to change this belief about myself? What would I have to deal with? What would I have to heal in order to change this belief about myself?
Ooh, that sounds hard.
It is hard. And I recommend doing this in the presence of a therapist, because the therapy process really allows you to gain that insight and allows your experiences to be welcome, allows your experiences to be acceptable, accepted, and that changes your paradigm, right? Because it says, I'm not acceptable, turns into, well, this person is demonstrating that I am acceptable, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's proving you wrong in that moment. And so it can offer some assistance to make that shift.
Yeah. Well, and that's one of the things that I like about EMDR so much when it's done well is that you're going, I don't know, at least this was what it was like for me, going back to those like previous moments in time and thinking about them, but like being able to think about them in a different way that is able to, take that rejection sensitivity away from myself. Like, it wasn't really about me back then, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, and I think that like that's really hard to believe. You can't just go like you're able to like logic your way around it, but like that doesn't it like helps with the experience of it and the emotional part of it being released and being able to be like, oh, okay, well, maybe that really didn't have anything to do with me.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have to carry that anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't have to hold on to that belief anymore. Like, one of the things that EMDR helps us with is shift our perspective from from internalizing to externalizing. So it allows us to say, that I didn't have control over that situation. It wasn't my fault. I didn't make that happen to me. I didn't deserve that. It basically allows you to like look at yourself and your situation from the outside in, instead of like just feeling it from the inside out. And so sometimes our feelings get confusing. They make us think that they're facts, but thing they're not. So one thing that we can remind ourselves is like, these are my go-tos. It's difficult, not dangerous, and feelings are not facts. I say those all the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So helpful.
So I think, we want to decide what paradigms we want to start believing in, right? When we start to make those decisions for ourselves, then we have to challenge the ones that we already have. We have to start saying, well, hey, that might not be true anymore. Maybe that was true back then, but it's not true anymore. We have to start talking to ourselves with compassion, accepting our feelings for what they are, and asking them to share with us what they have to say, but without overwhelming us. We have to move into intentionality instead of autopilot. Those are some of the ways that we can make this paradigm shift.
Yeah, I love that. I think that that's so powerful. You summed that up very well.
Thank you so much. I tried really hard. So to kind of end, what agreements, like, ask yourself, like, what agreements did you unconsciously make as a child? And which agreement are you ready to rewrite? Like, I think the most important question might actually be, what actions are you willing to take today to start working towards shifting your unconscious core beliefs? Those are some of the things that, we want to think about as we take away from this episode.
Yeah, I love that. I think that the thing I like the most is just like asking why and trying to get to that root cause of like, why am I making these choices? Like, how is this helpful? So I love that.
I love that too. Well, thank you so much for this conversation. This was excellent. And thank you for listening to Why Am I Like This? If you like our show, please leave us a rating and review on your favorite podcast platform. Follow the show and share it with friends. This episode was written and produced by me, Laura Wood, and Michaela Beaver. Our theme song is Making Ends Meet by Thick as Thieves. And a special thanks to Core Self, Beneberry Counseling, and Active Healing Psychiatric Services for sponsoring this show.